We're here with Jordan Maxwell. And Jordan, recently I was telling George Norrie and Jimmy Church about some of our fascinating road trips that we've taken. And people always ask me about the stories that you've told me and what you've shared with me. And probably one of the most interesting things I've ever heard is what you told me over dinner, is when you went into detail about your friend Nick Nocerino and the crystal skulls. Can you tell everybody about that?
Well, it's a very big story, but Nick Nocerino, many years ago, quite a few years ago, he passed away. He was a dear friend. He had ownership, or he had control over the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull. Annie Mitchell-Hedges allowed him to be in charge of the skull. And because he was probably one of the world's foremost experts on crystals, all kinds of crystals, communication with them, and all kinds of high-tech stuff with crystals. He was one of the best of the best. His name was Nick Nocerino. And he did some shows. He did some radio shows back in the mid-'70s with Bill Jenkins on ABC Radio in Los Angeles, ABC Los Angeles. And Bill Jenkins used to have a show called Open Mind. If you go on the web today to the videos, YouTube. If you go on the web to YouTube and type in Bill Jenkins Open Mind Show. It was called Open Mind. It was on ABC Radio in Los Angeles back in the 70s. And it was an extraordinarily fascinating radio show. Bill Jenkins was top of the line talk show host. And he would have on all kinds of extraordinary people. And I loved that show. If you go on the web and go to Bill Jenkins ABC Radio Open Mind Show, it will give you all of his shows. And then look for Nick Nocerino Crystal Skulls, and listen to it. And he will tell you the experience I'm telling you now. You can hear him tell it. And he said that he came in touch with the idea of crystal skulls. He said when he was in the military, he was stationed, and I think it was in the Second World War, he was stationed in France, in the south of France. And he said one night his commanding officer told him, "I'm going up to a secret society meeting. You want to come with me? I'll bring you up with me." And he said, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." So he said him and his superior officer, they drove up to Rennes-le-Château, the most famous castle of the Knights Templars that was made famous in the book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. It was a very famous book, came out in 1980, called Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
By Bajan and Lee.
By Bajan, Lee, and Lincoln, yeah. And it was about the secret societies of Freemasonry in Europe and France called the Priority of Sion. Priority of Sion, S-I-O-N, from which we get Z-I-O-N, Zion. And he said that him and his officer drove up to this castle that's out on the edge of a mountain overlooking the south of France. And it has a big watchtower, on to protect it. And that watchtower was the one that has been used by Jehovah's Witnesses on their magazine called the Watchtower Magazine. So Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower Magazine plays into the history of the Knights Templars and the Priority of Sion, or the Priority of the Holy House of Zion. And of course, in the very beginning, back in 1870s, when the Watchtower Society began to operate, The very first watchtowers were called Zion's Watchtower. Zion's Watchtower. And it showed the same identical watchtower that's on the Rennes-le-Chateau secret society castle in the south of France, which ties Jehovah's Witnesses to a secret society in Europe, a very powerful secret society of Knights Templars. And they are, this is the background of what we call Zionism. It's actually the Holy House of Sion, S-I-O-N, which is Greek for Zion, Zionism, not Zionism. Anyway, he said that him and his superior officer went up to this castle, and they were let in. They were expecting the officer, so they let him in too. And he said that they had a crystal skull. And he says, the first time I was ever introduced to the idea of crystals. I didn't know much about them, he said, but I was so fascinated with this crystal skull and how it could be used to talk to extraterrestrial intelligences. You talk to the skull and somebody else is hearing you out there. And then you could tell the skull that you want to see something. And whatever it is in history you want to see, you turn the skull around. So you're looking at the side of the head. You're looking at the temple area of the skull, the glass skull. And you tell the skull what you want to see in history. And it will show it to you. It will show you a whole video of whatever it is you wanted to see, as if it had already collected everything that's ever been done on the earth was in the skull. So you tell the skull what you want to see, and then you can watch a video and it will show you. You can even ask it to see yourself when you were a child. And you could ask it, let me see myself when I was with my mother. And I was 10 years old. I went to my grandmother's house, etc., whatever it is. And then it would show you. It would show you the pictures of you with your mother and back in your history. And he said, it was incredible. I was just shocked by what this skull could do. And so he said, but that castle was owned by the Knights Templars, the Knights of the Temple of Solomon, the Masonic order in Europe. And as I said, that's the same identical watchtower that is on the front of Jehovah's Witnesses today, the Watchtower magazine. And the Watchtower magazine also has the Masonic symbols on both sides, and the sun rising over the mountain. All of these are secret society symbols on the front of a Watchtower magazine. And so he said, what was interesting to me is that he said that crystal skull was a communication device that they could talk to and receive messages back from extraterrestrials, from somewhere out there in the universe. Somebody could talk to them and they could talk to them. And so I used to help Nick Nocerino when he was giving his lectures in Los Angeles at these big events. He would be speaking at these big seminars like Whole Life Expo, Conscious Life Expo, these big seminars. He would call me and I would go down and hang out with him and help him bring the tables and stuff and the skulls. He would sometimes give me the skull, the glass, the crystal skull, and I'm holding the skull. And he wants me to bring it inside. And he told me, if you drop this, I'll have to kill you. You gotta die if you drop this. This is priceless, priceless. This is a crystal skull that you can communicate with the other world. And he said, and so you take that in for me. And he would bring his box and I'd take that with him. And so I remember hearing lectures of a incredibly brilliant man. I'm not going to use his name, but I remember his lectures, and he was talking about the crystal skulls that the Knights Templars used to communicate with the other world, with the
Wow.
masters in the spirit world. And that's how the Knights Templar became so clever and so wealthy and so powerful. It's because they knew exactly what to do every day to make more money, to politically, do their politics and do what they're doing with the kings of Europe and around the world, setting up wars and revolutions and violence and making money and all of that. It was all being orchestrated by someone else out there. And the Masonic order was learning what to do through that skull. They would talk to they would talk to the other side, and the other side would tell the Masonic order what to do and what to look for and how to do what they wanted done. And so when I started hearing about the crystal skull, and later on I used to talk about that because I was fascinated by it. And I would talk about it on radio and do radio shows in Los Angeles, because I picked up on really important stories that other people heard as just entertainment. Most people would listen to Nick Nocerino as entertainment. I don't see Nick Nocerino as entertainment. Fascinating, important, interesting, off-the-wall, strange stuff about how a Masonic order in France, the French Grand Orient Temple Masons, could communicate with the spirit world through a crystal skull. And of course, you'll remember that George Lucas made one of the Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. I think that's what it was, wasn't it? Indiana Jones and the Crystal
Yes.
Skull.
The last
Yeah.
one that they made.
Right. And so if you see that movie, it's talking about extraterrestrial skulls. But this particular skull, the Nick Nocerino particular one, is called the Mitchell-Hedges Skull. And Annie Mitchell-Hedges was a lady up in Canada. And her father used to roam around Central America and go through the old temples. He was like original Indiana Jones. He was just like Indiana Jones. He would go through all the temples and find these strange artifacts, and then probably selling them to international buyers and whatever. And so she was his daughter, so she would go with him sometime on his excursions to Central and South America. And she said on the radio, that one time she was with him, and I think it was in Ecuador or one of those countries in Central America. And he was looking around the temple area to see what he could find. And she said, I saw the sun reflecting off of something in the dirt. It looked like a mirror. And she said, so I went over to see what it was that was reflecting the sunlight so bright. And she said, the more I cleaned it off, the more I could tell it was some kind of a crystal. And she said, I finally cleaned it all off and pulled it out. And it was a human head made out of crystal. And it had jaws that would move back and forth, and you could pop off the jaws, and it was made out of crystal. She said, you pop the jaws back on, and she said, so I cleaned it all up, and my dad let me hold on to it, for him, but he let me keep it. And so Annie Mitchell-Hedges was, I think, up in Montreal, one of those big Canadian cities on the East Coast, and she would let people come from all around the world to see this crystal skull and to see what it would do. It's extraordinary stuff, because Nick Nocerino said that he and the 3M company, I think it was 3M, and the computer company, can't remember the name of that company, one of the major computer companies, he took it to this big major computer company and the 3M company to do some experiments with this crystal skull. And And he said that they would shoot in the room, they would shoot a laser, a colored laser light into the skull, on the side of the skull, on the side of the head. And they would turn up the volume on the skull, turn up the volume, putting in that color laser into the skull. And he said, all of a sudden, out of the skull came one of the Aztecs or Mayan soldiers. And he said this soldier was like in the movie Star Wars or Indiana Jones. No, I guess it was Star Wars, where the princess comes out of the computer. That's, he says, just what it was.
Hologram.
A hologram, exactly. He said, as we shot that laser light into the side, a hologram came out of the skull, standing on the table. It was just a little picture of a little Aztec or Maya or Inca warrior. He was dressed like a warrior. And he said, and as we turned up the volume, kept turning the volume up, when we turned the volume up, he would get bigger. And then we'd turn it back down and he'd get smaller. So the more volume we turned up, he would get bigger and bigger and larger, until finally he was like 7 foot tall, hologram. And then one of the scientists said, let's just put it all together. Let's just put all the juice. And he turned it all the way up. And he said, and that hologram became physical. And this physical entity of this Maya, Inca, Aztec, whatever it was, soldier became real. And he said that soldier was looking at us, and we're standing there looking at him, and he's talking in his language to us and saying something. He seemed to be very unhappy with us. And he was talking to us as if he was warning us about something. We couldn't understand him. And so, but he's actually real. We could reach out and touch him, and he was wearing all the regalia of his people as a soldier. And he said, and so we turned the volume back down, and now he became just a hologram again. And as we turned it down, he just kept going smaller and smaller and smaller, until finally we pulled it all the way down to the bottom and shut it off. And then he went back inside the crystal skull. And he says, so there's all kinds of things you could do with this crystal skull. You could talk to it. You turn it around so you're looking at the side of the head, and you would tell the skull that you want to see something that happened in history, and it would show it to you. You could watch it like on a television show. It was like on a little TV in the skull. You could see everything happening. And Bill Jenkins, when he was interviewing Nick Nocerino, he said yes, and there was something else that was very interesting that the skull would do. And Nick Nocerino said yes. If you took a camera, we would take a camera and ask it to show me such and such that happened in history, some war or something, someone assassinated, like Lincoln's assassination. It would show it actual happening, as if this skull was able to capture all life on the earth and what actually happened, and could communicate it to you through a television show. Like, and he said, and so we would take a picture, we'd tell it to show me something, and when it would show it to you, we'd take a picture of it, take a beautiful picture, flawless picture of what you had just asked to see. And he said, then the next day when we come back, that picture had changed. It was a different picture. And he said, and each time when they would leave it set and come back the next day, that picture would change again. A beautiful, flawless picture, but not the same one. Something else had happened at the same time. And it was showing you like a series of pictures of what happened. And he said, so we were seeing these beautiful pictures, which is the same one picture, but every time we come back, it's the same picture, but it's now totally different. And he said, and so we were wondering, how is that possible for a photograph to, reproduce a different picture the following day? And each day it was a different picture.
Wow.
So obviously there was some kind of other world, what I call preternatural, not supernatural, but a preternatural otherworld technology. Somebody had a crystal a long time ago that was able to tell you and show you whatever you wanted to see. It would play it back for you. It was called the Mitchell-Hedges Skull. And the lady who owned it was called Annie Mitchell-Hedges. And she lived in Canada, and you could go up there. And Nick Nocerino said on the radio, if you want to take the time, you can call her. He said, call me, and I'll give you her phone number. You call and make arrangements with her and go up and see her. She'll let you come in and see the crystal skull and play with it. And so I was fascinated by that.
It would appear, Jordan, that these type of ancient consciousness technologies have been on this earth for a long time. And from what you're describing, there's a sort of a metamorphic and telepathic interfacing with this crystal. And we can only assume that, based on this character that came out of there, that perhaps these ancient civilizations held this sort of technology and this sort of, maybe these antediluvian sort of civilizations out there.
That's right. We don't know what kind of life was on this earth millions of years ago. We just know that there was highly, highly advanced otherworld intelligences on this earth, who most likely, according to the stories that were written back then, came from out of space. They came from out there. They came here. And so you ask any child, an 8-year-old child, that's a Christian child, do you believe in God? Yes. Where is God? God's out there. Well, out there, I'm sorry to tell you, if God's out there, what about angels? Do you believe in angels? Yes. Where are the angels? They're with God. Where? Out there. Well, that means God and the angels are extraterrestrial. They're not from here. They're extraterrestrial.
Yes, that's exactly right. Now, there's a few points, though, that I take away from this when you're talking, that the Templar treasure that they fled with was, according to what you're saying, this crystal skull, and that the secret societies have been communicated to, according to this information, they've been communicated to by otherworldly intelligences. But there's something else that you told me over dinner last time that was very interesting. A lot of people out there, especially when you talk about this Holy Blood, Holy Grail work by Bayesian and Lee, they'll be saying, what about the Holy Grail? You told me that there's an astrotheology component to the Holy Grail.
Right. Lots of people talk about the Holy Grail as supposedly the cup that Christ drank out of at the Last Supper. Well, the Last Supper was merely it's what we call the last Passover meal. That's a very big story. It's just an astrological story. It has no basis in actual history. It's a story from the stars. The last cup, the cup Jesus supposedly drank out of when he said, take, eat, and he broke the bread and gave it to his apostles and then passed the wine around, and they were to eat and to drink. Well, we know that that's what they do in the Catholic Church. The Catholic priest at the Mass on Sunday will pour a little bit of wine, usually it's grape juice, and he will have the representing the wine, and then he eats the wafer, eats the bread, and drinks the wine. The bread was supposed to represent the very actual physical body of Jesus, and the wine represents symbolically his blood. And blood is the life force in any body. Anybody, if you have a body, you're having blood in your body, and that's what keeps you alive. And so Jesus said, take this and eat this. It represents you eating my flesh and drinking my blood. And so we are told in the reference works on the Knights Templars that when the Catholic Church came in to destroy the Knights Templar, they were Catholic to start with. They were Masonic orders in the Catholic Church called the Knights Templar. And they were very, very powerful and very interesting, and they knew all kinds of high-tech stuff, how to do things, and they were very extremely powerful. So even the Pope was afraid of them because they knew things that they're not supposed to know. And they would know in advance things they were supposed to do and know. They knew exactly what to do. They're always on top of everything. And wars and violence and revolutions and banking, they always knew the right thing to do. And so the story was in the reference book that the reason why the Knights Templars was so incredibly clever and so knowledgeable is because they were said to be talking to a head, some kind of a head, a human head. Well, that's what the Knights Templars in France showed Nick Nazareno, a glass skull. It's the skull of a human skull, but it's totally glass, and it's beautiful. You go on the web and type in crystal skull Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull, and go to image on the web. Just go to pictures, click on image, and then click on Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull, or just crystal skulls, and it will pop up and show you the different crystal skulls that have been found all over the earth. There are supposed to be 13 crystal skulls, according to the native peoples in Central America who know about these things. There are supposed to be 13 of them, and all 13 have to be put together for some reason. And so they've only got 9 right now. They've found 9 of them, but they're told that there are 13 of them. Well, the Mitchell-Hedges skull was the most important one. It just was found by Annie Mitchell-Hedges down in Central America, with her father rummaging through all the temples and picking up anything he could to sell it. And he was like Indiana Jones. And so when I am hearing the stories of the Knights Templars were arrested. The Pope had them arrested, and the king sent out his troops and arrested the Knights Templars. And it was said that they were killed by the papacy. The Pope had them killed because they were too smart, too clever, too wise, too powerful, very wealthy, and they were running everything. And the Pope didn't know how in the world they knew so much. And so he was challenged by this organization of people under him that was far smarter than he was. And because they always knew what to do to become more and more wealthy and powerful. Well, if they were talking to extraterrestrials in a skull, and that's what the reference works, you go to the library and read about Knights Templars, it will tell you the Knights Templars became so powerful that the church couldn't deal with them. They wanted them dead. These people are too smart and too powerful and too wealthy, and they're scaring the Pope because he thought he was God on earth. Now he comes to find out, no, this organization is far, far more powerful than the Vatican. And the Pope better watch what he does and better check with them on anything he's going to do. And so the Pope got together with the King of France, King Philippe le Bel, and decided, let's put these people to death. Let's kill them. Let's wipe them out. Whack them. One gang whacking the other gang. And so, but the reference works.
It's like 1507. Jacques de Molay came to his demise.
That's right. Exactly. That's when Jacques de Molay was put to death. That was on Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, Jacques de Molay was put to death by the Pope and the King of France, and with all of his other Knights Templar followers. All of them were put to death. Not all of them died, though. Many of them got away. They're still here today. But a lot of them did die the hard way. They died because they were murdered by the Vatican and the King of France. And the King of France didn't mind killing the Knights Templar because he owed them money. They were very powerful, and they were loaning money to kings and princes. And if you didn't pay, you will pay one way or the other. And so the King of France owed them a lot of money, and so did the Pope. So they figured, you know what, why don't we settle our bills? Why don't we declare bankruptcy? Well, we'll just kill all of them. Kill them all. This way we don't have to owe any money to anybody. We took all of their money, now we just kill them and we have to pay them back. But, as I said, but in the reference works, when you read about the Knights Templars, it says that they were put to death by the Pope because they were dabbling in heresy. They were evil people. I don't think about evil. I think they just scared the Pope and they scared the king. And so they were put to death because they had the reference works, the books will tell you, history books will tell you, that it was said that they had a skull that they could communicate with and talk to, and it would tell them what to do and what not to do and how to do, if you're going to have a war, when to start the war, what to do and how to do to win it, etc. And so when I heard that, I've heard that many years ago, the Templars were found guilty of doing things against the church and against the king in France because they knew how to do things, because they had this skull. I didn't say a crystal skull, I just said a skull, a human skull that they could communicate. Well, that's the same thing. If you go on the web and look up Mitchell-Hedges Skull, and it will show you a crystal skull that today, if you could get to see it, somebody else has it. When Annie Mitchell-Hedges passed away, somebody else in her family has it today. And I don't know if you could go see it or not. I don't know.
Jordan, what about, though, the quest for this Holy Grail, though? And I don't know how much time we got left on the recording, but the Holy Grail, you've told me before, is connected to astrotheology with the Crater constellation.
All right, yes. It's called the Krator.
Krator.
Krator. The Krator constellation. In the heavens, there's a small group of stars that are there's supposedly 12 major constellations, the 12 constellations of the zodiac, okay? But there's actually something like 96 constellations, all kinds of little sets of stars. Most people never even heard of them. Most people know that there are 12 major constellations, but they didn't know it was like 36 or 96 little ones out there. Well, one of those little ones that's not so little and is very important in the sky is called the Krator. The Krator constellation, and what it looks like is like a cup, a golden cup. And then this is where we get the idea of holding the golden cup of the Grail. The Holy Grail is a cup that held the blood of Jesus. No, the holy blood was just a story. It's just an astronomical or astrological story in astrology. There was no cup. In point of fact, there was no cup. Because when you talk about Jesus and the cup of the Grail and how Jesus drank out of the cup, that's just a story. None of it is actual history. It's just a story. It's an astrology. Astrologers know about the cup of the Grail. But, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then Indiana Jones and the what was it called, where they were looking for the cup with the Nazis? Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. The Last Crusade. The last crusade, if you remember, was a cup. And they found that cup in what was the city in Jordan where they found the cup in the movie Indiana Jones with his
Not
father?
Petra, is it?
Huh? Petra.
No, I don't know where it would be there in Jordan.
It was in Petra. 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 If you go back and watch the Indiana Jones, the Last Crusade was to find the cup that Jesus drank out of, because you would have the cup that held the blood of Jesus. And so that's what the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was. Indiana Jones and his father, Sean Connery, were looking for that sacred cup. Everybody has ever heard of it, wanted to see the sacred cup that Jesus drank out of. Well, first of all, Jesus never drank out of a cup. It's just an astrological story based on the Krator constellation, the holy cup of the Grail. And supposedly the Grail is a cup that Jesus poured the wine into and had people drink his blood. So naturally in Christianity, that would be an incredible find if they found the holy cup of Grail, the Holy Grail. And so when you look at the story of the Holy Grail, if you go back to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, rent the video and watch it, you will see that Indiana Jones traces, with his father, traces down where that holy cup is. They finally find it in the little town called Petra. This very, very famous place. Tourists from all over the world go to Jordan to see the temple at Petra. And it's in the movie. And you see in the movie, they go through the mountains and they come out and there's a big temple that's chiseled away in the side of a mountain, an enormous temple. And they go inside the temple. And there is a Masonic order, a Freemason. There's a Masonic knight, like one of the knights of the Order of Solomon. He's a Masonic knight, and he's bending down, praying over the table that has all the cups. And the idea is you have to pick the right cup. There's all kinds of cups, and if you're going to receive the blessings from the gods, you have to pick the right cup. And that's what the movie's all about, the picking of the cup of Christ. But in point of fact, no, it's just a story in astrology, the story of the Krator. The Krator is the cup of the Grail, the Holy Grail.
That's absolutely fascinating. Well, Jordan, that's all the time that we have for today. So I want to tell everybody that we're going to come back and we're going to make more of these great videos with you sharing these very fascinating stories. But how can people find you? How can they make a donation? And how can they join the Jordan Maxwell Research Society?
Yes, I thank you. Go on my website, Jordan Maxwell Show. There are other websites out there that have my name, but they're not mine. Other people are using my name. But my website is Jordan Maxwell Show, S-H-O-W. Go on jordanmaxwellshow.com, and you will see beneath the picture, my picture, the opening picture, you will see the word Jordan Maxwell Research Society. Click on that, and it's a different. I have a different website. It's called the Jordan Maxwell Research website, and you get it from my home, from my original website, which is Jordan Maxwell Show. And when you click on it, you have to join the Research Society. And when you do, then you're going to find all kinds of pictures and documents and lectures and words and terms and white papers, research papers on all kinds of occult subjects that you probably never heard anything about in religion and government and banking and military, all kinds of dark subjects that people don't know anything about. I try and pick up all of these interesting, dark stuff that's out there and put it into my research society. So go on jordanmaxwellshow.com and click on the Jordan Maxwell Research Society. Click on it and join it. And once you join, then will see all of my research over the years I've been doing. I got pictures and documents, audios and videos, and highly recommended materials. You click on that and go to all the books and videos and things I highly recommend if you're interested in these subjects. I've got a whole research society called the Jordan Maxwell Research Society website. And you get it off of going to my original website, which is jordanmaxwellshow.com. And thank you for letting me tell people about that.
Well, thank you. And we'll be back soon with more videos. And